Hello there, I'm Gloria Makarenko. Now today we're going to take a moment just to breathe. It has been a very tense week of troubling news. We're here for you. This is Our Vancouver. Coming up, a look way back to the big Fraser Valley flood of 1948. And food as a cultural bridge. Meet the master behind Tamam Palestinian cuisine. But first, his eyes are young and his skill is deep. Meet one of our award-winning wildlife photographers. Now, our city has some amazing wildlife photographers, and one of them is certainly a rising star in that world. Martin Gregus just won the Rising Star Portfolio Award from the Natural History Museum's Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition. Martin, hello there and congratulations to you.
Hi, Gloria. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Now, your passion overall is polar bears. So tell us, where did you go to photograph them?
So most of my pictures, especially the awarded ones, were taken around Churchill, Manitoba. Though I do travel across other parts of the Canadian Arctic to film polar bears, including Nunavut as well.
Okay, well, just tell us just what do you have to do to set up in a remote place of this country to really capture some up close and personal moments with polar bears?
Yeah, I mean it's quite the process. So we started off in Churchill, Manitoba. We built up sort of our camp that we ended up staying in for the duration of our time, 14 days in 2020, another 20 days in 2021. And yeah, we built that camp right in Churchill in town, and then we sort of take that boat over to the location where the polar bears are, and then we sort of anchor down and run into ground and camp there for the duration of our expedition.
And how do the polar bears feel about you being so close?
I mean, they're curious. We do put in a lot of and homework to sort of build a relationship with them. So first few days is sort of introductory both to us and to the bears. They get used to our smells, get used to our presence, and then once we build that relationship, usually takes 3 or 4 days. Then everyone's comfortable enough that we can get to work.
Okay, well, there's one photograph. Well, they're all beautiful, but there's one that looks like you're actually swimming with the polar bears. How did you capture that?
Yeah, so that photograph was actually captured with our remote controlled boat setup that we built here in Vancouver. It's basically a fairly large catamaran with an underwater camera in front of it and then a remote controlled trigger. Unfortunately, when we got up north, it stopped working and we had to improvise. I ended up filming that shot on the end of a long stick, and the camera was at one end and I was on the other, and basically just hunkering down, hoping that a polar bear swims by, and eventually one did, and we were able to capture that.
Timing is everything, and 10 points for improvisation on that one for sure. So, I mean, I'm thinking you're only 25 years old, and this isn't your first, international award either. How did you get so good so young?
I mean, I've been doing it for over 17 years now. I started when I was 8 years old. Living in Vancouver, we have so much wonderful nature all around us. So I just started taking pictures here close to Vancouver, and then eventually started traveling across Canada. And, just practice makes perfect. Just always taking pictures, always having my camera on me. And somehow I got here.
Somehow we had a little bit of influence from the family too. Tell us about your dad.
Yeah, my dad was a photographer and a graphic designer in Slovakia, where I grew up, or sorry, where I was born. And he always supported me and my photography, and I used to always go out with him to take pictures. And then now he comes with me to take pictures. So
How did those shoots kind of influence you, especially when we're talking about conservation and climate change issues so predominantly now?
yeah, I mean, the polar bears, they've had a crazy impact on my life. I mean, not only do I get to spend such crazy amounts with them, watch them build a relationship with me and my team, but also they've changed my life. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. And winning this competition, even being here with you today, getting a chance to share this story is an amazing opportunity to share the lives of these bears and influence polar bear conservation in Canada and internationally. They are tremendous creatures, and the Arctic is unfortunately warming. They are losing their environment, and especially now that I've had the experience of living with them, I would hate to see it go. I mean, they are more family now, as crazy as that may sound, as just random polar bears.
So, Martin, I understand during the floods that we've been experiencing this week, you've managed to get out with your camera.
Yeah, I went out yesterday, and I spent almost the entire day out in the Sumas Prairie and in Abbotsford, and then I went out again this morning. We chartered a small plane and we flew over the entire area from basically Pitt Meadows up the Fraser Valley into Chilliwack and back.
And what did you see?
I mean, the extent of the damage, it's incredible. It's crazy. It's uh, that whole area, Sumas Prairie, used to once be a lake, and it seems like it has basically filled up almost right to the top. There was a fire there this morning burning in an area that I was taking pictures at just yesterday. So even just 12 hours, it's crazy the change that has happened.
Okay, and what about people contacting you to specifically take some images?
Yeah, so yesterday after I got back, I posted some pictures on Instagram. I did a little story there, and almost immediately a bunch of people got in contact with me asking if I can take pictures of their houses. One guy actually stopped me when I was taking the videos in Abbotsford, and he asked if I could look around and see if I can find a way for him to get his daughter in Hope. So this morning, actually, when we chartered the plane, we sort of tried to scout some escape routes and exits, as well as document people's houses to see if we can help at all. I even though I can't help, I wish I could help a little bit more. We do what we can.
Are you getting any pushback from any officials in terms of, I imagine they don't want too many people in the air or, non-official people in the airspace. Is that considered a hazard in any way?
Yeah, I mean, basically yesterday they called it a no-fly zone for aircraft and drones as well, which has not really been helpful at all because I want to support the community and use drones to, document people's property, use it for rescue. There's still a lot of people stuck out there. And as well, I got contacted by these people to see if we could get them out of Chilliwack, and there's no way of getting planes in there because just too much red tape, unfortunately.
I see. So what goes through your mind when you see those extreme images?
Yeah, I mean, for me, we grow up seeing them on television. Usually they're very far away from us, and to have that sort of right in our neighborhood is kind of scary. And it I know some of these people that are stuck there. I've worked with some of these people that are stuck there, and some are complete strangers. But regardless of what they are, you sort of feel for that community, and you just want to help out as much as you can, even though you do feel kind of helpless sometimes.
Martin, thank you very much for that.
No problem. Thank you.
Look at the camera, see it? This is our Vancouver.
This is our Vancouver.
All right, it's time for one of our favorite features. This is where we showcase some of the photographs that you have sent in to us. Now, first, Niusha Habibi didn't let the rain of last week stop her from getting a good walk over the suspension bridge. Niusha, nice work there. And another peaceful moment last week before the rain and the winds hit, Steve Nips took in the sunset at New Westminster Pier Park. Lovely stuff, Steve. Thank you for sharing. And finally, Georgia Pasalacqua was one of many people out along our seawall to take a look at that big barge that ran onto the beach in the storm. Georgia, thank you. That image is going to stay with us for some time. And do send us more. It's easy. Just email your favorite shots to us, bcphotos@cbc.ca. That's bcphotos@cbc.ca. Now, the images of last week's relentless rain and rising waters are certainly going to stay with us. And as the climate changes, more of these extreme events are expected. As the CBC's Stephen Quinn found out, getting ready for more water has planners rethinking everything from shorelines to the seawall and how new buildings ought to be designed.
My name is Angela Daniluk, and I'm a senior sustainability specialist at the City of Vancouver.
And your specialty is?
Biology, actually, marine ecology to be precise. And I work on adaptation to sea level rise and biodiversity at the City of Vancouver.
Over the course of COP26 in the past 2 weeks, we've been hearing an awful lot about sea level rise, and I know this is a preoccupation of yours. This is your main focus at the City of Vancouver. Tell me what we're in for.
Right, we are expecting about 50 centimeters of sea level rise by 2050, and then about 100 to 1.4 meters of sea level rise by 2100. And yet we know that there'll be more sea level rise coming, perhaps 200 centimeters by 2200.
And what is the impact of that on a city like this?
Right. The City of Vancouver, we were, built at a time when water levels were pretty predictable and we didn't know or think about sea level rise. So we are very vulnerable to the slow impact of sea level rise as well as the sudden impact of a coastal storm surge that could happen when we have a high tide and sea level rise. So that will cause overland flooding within our communities.
And let's talk about the St. Paul's Hospital site, because again, in the predictions, that's going to be potentially underwater by 2100. What has been done to mitigate the impact of sea level rise on that site?
So over the lifetime of that hospital, it will experience a range of climate impacts: extreme heat, drought, extreme rain, also coastal flooding. And so we think it's the first time in Canada that a complex health facility like St. Paul's has gone through such a comprehensive climate risk assessment. So they're doing that, and they're actually building the hospital to 5 meters, so quite high.
And is this the future of this city? I mean, with all of the development that we see, shoring up against sea level rise.
Yes, it is. I mean, we're a coastal community. We're going to have to respond to sea level rise. We're not alone in this challenge. There are other cities around the world who are also responding. And for areas like False Creek, I mean, we can expect to see in the future, different shorelines, softer shorelines that are raised higher. The seawall might move either in elevation or in location as we respond to sea level rise and coastal flooding.
We have had a heat wave over the summer that killed 600 people. We've had, I don't know if these storms are normal for this time of year. We've had a tornado touchdown at UBC. This is happening right now, is it not?
Yes, climate change is happening right now. We are experiencing it.
I guess the question I get asked all the time is, where is the urgency?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I mean, leadership matters. Leadership at all levels of government is really key to advancing climate action. That being said, there's a lot of grassroots activity happening that is moving climate action forward. So it's my hope that, COP26, that they will deliver some stronger language, that they won't water it down. But that being said, I mean, we still have to take action. We still have to do the work. The ocean's not going to stop rising. So come Friday, if they water it down or not, I'll still be here trying to figure out what to do about sea level rise with my colleagues.
Right. Angela, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stephen, thank you so much for that. Now, BC's whale population has been a huge draw for tourists around the world. Well, now whale lovers in the U.S. don't have to travel to experience them. An immersive new exhibition at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. is bringing people up close to J-Pod. Susanna De Silva reports.
Despite being more than 4,500 kilometers away, it feels like J-Pod is literally within reach.
So let me introduce a young J-Pod orca that bears the burden of the future of her family and her home. Her name is Keiki.
Augmented reality glasses allow visitors to experience the threats to the orca's existence, including boat noise that interferes with their ability to hunt. there are only 73 southern resident killer whales left in the world.
Since I was a little girl, I was fascinated with this population of orcas that lived off the Pacific coast, so much so that I've actually made my home here.
The project was born out of a chance meeting between a Nova Scotia-born producer and an employee of a UK-based tech company.
How can we create something using tech to help this family, help bring awareness, and ultimately save their ecosystem and their home?
So from everything from the saddle patches to the genders, to the sizes, to the relative scale, we really tried to bring as much as possible for there. So people do feel like there is a grounding in reality. It's not just cartoon orcas swimming around, but we want to make them feel a sense of connection and, and hopefully then an affection.
And it was a connection through Microsoft that brought the exhibit to the attention of the Smithsonian staff.
I am a Midwesterner, so I had to ask, where's the Salish Sea? Now I know. And the more we talked, we realized it was a really good fit.
As the museum has set a goal of doing more to inform visitors about the impacts humans are having on the natural world, staff felt the message was important, even for visitors who may not be near any ocean at all.
They may never get to the Northwest, but still they have an association that there are creatures in the world that are either endangered and perhaps I can help in some way.
When we've had researchers
Researching whales has been the lifelong work of Andrew Treitz. He is thrilled to see the whales being featured on such a prominent stage at a time when he says all attention to their plight is helpful, especially internationally.
It tells me that what we're doing here matters. Maybe also it sort of puts a bit more pressure on us to get it right, because we know the world is watching.
His team recently compared the declining southern resident killer whales, including J-pod, and their thriving nearby cousins, the northern residents. Both rely on declining Chinook salmon runs, but to their surprise, the southerns actually had more fish to eat, raising more questions about why they're declining and where the biggest threats are, possibly in U.S. waters.
Their territory, their habitat goes from here, our home, all the way down to California. And we need to be sure that everybody is looking at their backyards as being the home of the southern resident killer whales. But if we don't look elsewhere and realize that a whale's got to eat every day of the year, I think we are dooming them to extinction.
An issue not lost on Adam Olson, a local MLA and member of the Sartlip First Nation.
The goal, of course, is to try to kind of bring back that relationship with nature that I feel we've lost.
An excerpt from one of his speeches in the legislature is in the exhibit.
It's a collective effort that's going to help save these whales, and it's going to require a global attention paid to them.
The next 10 years are crucial for the health of the jade.
And the exhibit's creators wanted to ensure visitors left knowing ways they could help.
So that's everything from what you use, how, you're watching your plastic, how you use plastic recycling, to what you consume.
A virtual experience with some real-world solutions.
These types of experiences make you want to help and make you feel connected and actually give you that compassion and empathy for what they're going through. How did you feel when that big boat came by?
I didn't want it to hit any of the orcas.
And even from a distance, it seems connections are being made. Susanna Da Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
Coming up, Johanna Wagstaff explains the scientific connection between your workouts and the weather.
So at first I attempted to do this whole thing while running. It was a disaster. So let's just say, for those of us who like to exercise outdoors, extreme weather days might not deter the most hardcore of us.
You just figure out what the weather is and out you come.
But the simple question is it safe to be exercising in extreme weather conditions? The answer might not be quite as simple. Let's start with extreme cold. Generally, if you're dressed in the right layers and exposed skin has all been protected, experts say heading outdoors is a good thing. Check the forecast ahead of time, plan your gear, and length of time outdoors accordingly. Wind chill is important. The wind can penetrate your clothes and remove the insulating layer of warm air that surrounds your body. Any exposed skin is vulnerable to frostbite. Getting wet makes you more vulnerable to the cold, and if you get soaked, you might not be able to keep your core body temperature high enough. And then there are times when it's not worth it at all. For extreme sports like cross-country skiing or running, for example, extreme temperatures, we're talking minus 18 degrees Celsius and an extreme wind chill, well, then your lungs might be at risk. Exercising in the extreme cold over and over again can lead to hyper-responsive lungs, making you more sensitive to allergens. That's why experts suggest covering your mouth on those days to warm air before it heads to your lungs. How about the other end of the spectrum?
Felt really drained, felt not even sweating anymore because I'm overheated.
Extreme heat is often more deadly, especially when it involves high humidity. That makes it difficult for sweat to evaporate away from your skin and regulate temperatures, putting extra stress on your body. Light exercising on extreme heat days might be okay, but experts recommend monitoring for any early signs of heat stroke or exhaustion and stopping immediately if you do sense any. Drinking lots of water, taking lots of breaks, and did I mention hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. The warmer the temps, the greater the chance for dehydration. And know your own limitations. For those with underlying health conditions, the really young or elderly, it's harder for their bodies to regulate temperatures. So taking activities indoors might be the better bet. But if you've checked the weather, you've got the gear, go get it. And now, you're science smart. If you've got a science question on your mind, send me a tweet, try to get it answered.
Thank you so much, Johanna. You are watching Our Vancouver. I'm Gloria Makarenko. Now, there is nothing better than the flavor of great food to open up our minds. And that is the mindset of the owners of Canada's first Palestinian restaurant. And it's right here in Vancouver. With us now, Sobhi and Tamam Zobaidi. They own the place on Hastings. It is called Tamam. Hello to you both.
Hello, Gloria.
I'm so glad to have you there. And Sobhi, thanks for doing double duty with the camera work there as well. I mean, your kitchen looks cozy. It looks inviting. What kind of atmosphere would you say you've created?
I think we created a very sort of a family style dinner restaurant where anybody who eats here, they feel like they're eating in their own kitchen. Most of our customers, they know us by our names. We know most of our customers by name. So yes, that's the atmosphere. It's chill, it's mellow, it's jazzy. We only play jazz music, and we make fantastic food.
Oh, fantastic food like what? What are some of the typical flavors you work with?
Okay, here, show you
For
some.
example, now I made some hummus and tahina sauce, some kibbeh. I will open it for you. Kibbeh is like very traditional. It's like ground beef with onions and a little bit spices and almond. We fried it and we stuff it and fry. And then I have mutabbal, olives, homemade hot sauce, and then I will make some cauliflower fried.
Being prepared in the fryer.
Cauliflower in the fryer, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
You're taking us on a little bit of a wild ride with the camera there, but would you say you had a signature dish?
A signature dish, yes.
Yes, we do. And I will start turning it upside down right now, which is like a...
This is, I want to show you, this is one of the most popular dishes in also Arab Mediterranean cuisine, which is stuffed grape leaves. Now, these are grape leaves that are stuffed and cooked, slow cooking for many hours, and they are vegan and gluten-free. And this is probably the most popular dish we have at the restaurant.
It looks amazing.
Wait till you taste it, Gloria. I wish you can taste it right now because it is amazing.
So I will put a few and then I will finish it with lamb shank.
Oh, there she goes. I wish this was smell-o-vision. I really do, because I can just imagine the aroma.
So we'll add some lamb shank with the grape leaves.
The lamb shanks along with the stuffed grape leaves.
Yes.
Oh, that looks...
This is a very popular dish, especially in winter time.
Oh, gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And you know, you made a mention of art, and how did you get involved with the children's book? It's called Arab Fairy Tale Feasts.
Oh, yes. This is like a few years ago. The authors, A few years ago, the publishers of who are Vancouverites, they have a publishing house in Granville Island, Trade Wind Books. So they published the Chinese fairy tale feasts 4 or 5 years ago. I bought the book with my daughter, and we read it. Spent about 8 months reading it because we would read it in the night, the story. Then in the weekend, we'd do the recipe. And the book is same thing. So we love the book, and we know the authors, the publishers, and who have been with us. So they've been asking us to work with them on an Arab edition for this series, which we did. And the book is fabulous. It has Arab folk tales. And each tale has a story, and each story mentions a dish. And we wrote the recipes for those dishes.
Oh, that sounds like a wonderful project. And I know you're working on a cookbook, so we shall be watching for the Tamam cookbook as well. Thank you so much. You've warmed up our day.
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you for... I wish I can send these to you now.
And I wish I could try it. Take good care. Bye-bye for now.
Bye. Take care.
I'm Dylan McGarty, and this is our Vancouver.
Now, if you're a fan of contemporary dance, Dance in Vancouver is being held from November 24th to the 28th. Now, the program features the most modern and forward-thinking talent in this city. And for all the details, just go to their website. And if a concert is more your thing, Canadian rocker Sam Roberts has 2 shows at the Commodore Ballroom, November 23rd and 24th.
Hey, I'm Grant Lawrence from CBC Music here with great news for fans of wildly unhinged and wildly unappreciated rock and roll music. The incredible Montreal band / force of nature that was Tricky Woo has re-released their first 3 albums on vinyl, courtesy of Blow the Fuse Records. But don't take my word on how great Tricky Woo was and is. These folks will do it for me.
The most intense thing I'd ever seen.
What a face-ripping record.
It's like 100 AC/DCs fighting each other in a tin room.
Some kind of animal was coming out.
Andrew was passing out whips to the audience to whip him.
Crashed on top of a table, glasses, bottles flying everywhere.
Initially found Tricky Woo to be competition.
I just remember laughing a lot, actually.
It's all Tricky Woo, you gotta see Tricky Woo.
So loud.
So powerful.
And they put something into the world that isn't once familiar and totally fresh.
I'm not a man, I'm a coastline. Who writes that?
That's just a taste of the kind of impact and influence that Tricky Woo has had on musicians then and now. And yes, trivia fans, this ferocious band that channeled the MC5 and Rocket from the Crypt and Blue Cheer named themselves after the sweet little Pekingese dog from the All Creatures Great and Small TV show. In 1999, Tricky Woo really came into their own on their 3rd album, which was called Sometimes I Cry, an all-time rock and roll classic. That is Montreal band Tricky Woo with Let the Good Times Roll. Unfortunately, the band was a victim of bad timing. They were maybe 2 or 3 years ahead of their time, just missing out on the return of rock gold rush, when garage bands of similar mind and sound, like the White Stripes, the Hives, and Jet, all made it big. Tricky Woo did let out a loud howl in 1999, though, going to #1 on Canadian campus radio and landing on the Mike Bullard Show.
Please welcome Tricky Woo.
There you go. That's Tricky Woo with arguably their best song ever, Fly the Orient, as performed on the Mike Bullard Show back in November of 1999. And this fall, the first 3 classic Tricky Woo albums have been re-released on vinyl, with a documentary supposedly to come as well, all of which will hopefully give this Montreal band some of the wider respect and admiration they have always deserved some 20 years later. Any song by Tricky Woo is what you need to add to your pump-up playlist for this week. I'm Grant Lawrence from CBC Music. Rock on, keep the good times rolling, and I'll check in with you again next week.
Coming up, balancing our love of travel with the love of the planet. You are watching Our Vancouver. I'm Gloria Makarenko. Now, thousands of people traveled by plane to discuss climate change at COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland. Their commutes highlight the challenge of, balancing concern for the climate and the desire and the potential need for travel. The CBC's Ian Hannah-Mansing looked into how both the industry and the environmental movement is attempting to find that balance.
Vancouver Airport CEO describes this as a small city. She says up to 26,000 people work here. The terminal itself is the biggest single building in British Columbia. YVR had been aiming to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Now they say they've moved that target to 2030, just 9 years away.
It's the right thing to do from a community point of view, from our contribution to the economy, to support local businesses to work with us who are working towards solutions either in clean tech or lowering their own footprint.
The road to net zero includes things like switching many of YVR's vehicles to electric and more efficiently heating and cooling the terminal. But Vrooman concedes the airport is only a small part of the carbon footprint of air travel. It's those jets loaded with passengers and cargo crossing oceans and continents that generate the bulk of the emissions.
So how do we balance our climate concerns with a desire to fly? In a way, COP26 is an illustration of the dilemma, drawing delegates from around the world. So we asked 2 environmentalists with 2 different views of traveling to conferences.
Zipporah Berman is in Glasgow now. She chairs what's called the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty and was invited to COP26 by the organizers. I spoke to her before she left Vancouver.
It was a big struggle for me because right now there's no question that aviation is pretty much anyone's biggest personal carbon footprint. If you take one flight, to offset it, you would have to become vegetarian for 4 years. And so I thought long and hard about it. My family and I have restricted personal travel now for over a decade because of our concerns about climate change. But this Conference of the Parties that's starting in Glasgow next week is a critical moment in human history. We need to hold our governments to account. I think it's really important that we have representatives of civil society there, that we watchdog the process, that we encourage them to be as ambitious as possible. And then we tell the world what's happening inside those rooms.
Erica Frank has a different view. The UBC professor says even taking the stairs to our interview instead of the elevator is part of her commitment to use less energy. Her approach to air travel?
The thing that's special about flying is that in just a few hours you can eliminate anything that you tried to do for the last years in terms of being kind to the environment. The amount of damage that can be done in a few hours, based on the data, and only based on the data, I went from a life of taking an airplane trip every month or so for work, and often also for pleasure, to one where I do so usually once a year or so. And It was because the pleasure and the professional gain that I might have gotten from doing that, it wasn't fair. There were too many people. If we're serious about calling this a climate emergency, we have to say, I'm going to make a little bit of personal sacrifice.
So just to tell you a little bit about the MPH program.
A few days before our interview, Frank spoke to a group in the U.S. by video link, and she wishes COP26 delegates would do the same.
I have friends who are more serious about this, more virtuous than me about this, and who don't travel by air anymore and severely restrict their travel. But I restrict it some. I try to look for alternatives, and I try to encourage others to do the same, because it's the single most important thing that the 11% of the world who flies can do to reduce our personal carbon footprint.
As you heard, Berman agrees we should try to reduce our flights, but as a veteran of COP conferences, she says it's important to meet face to face.
If you do it on Zoom, you don't actually build trust and personal relationships, and these issues are hard. And a lot of the meetings happen behind closed doors, so it's about access. When you go to a conference of the parties, it's shocking how much access you have, because there are all the ministers just walking in the halls. There are some of the world's leading experts, economists and scientists, and everyone's together in one building. And so more gets done in that 2-week period than that gets done in the year in between. And if you're not there, then you miss out on a lot of those conversations, and you can't influence those conversations. And what happens when the negotiations and the discussions go online is that participation is very limited, and often critical voices are just left out.
As for those of us who are flying for other reasons, the aviation industry is hoping changes in technology will, over time, reduce air travel's carbon cost.
You know, Canada is a great country in so many ways. We're blessed by big geography and small population. So we need to fly in order to create the social and the economic connections, in order to move goods for trade. We need a healthy aviation sector. So I would like us to get to a place where we don't see aviation as the enemy, we see carbon. And so how do we decarbonize aviation so that there's not that same kind of trade-off? Because we need to fly, given our geography and given the size of our population. So that's why we're doing what we're doing.
Coming back, we're going to look back to the Fraser Valley flood of 1948. Hello, welcome back to Our Vancouver. I'm Gloria Makarenko. Well, it has been an unprecedented week of bad news, and at this time, many of our major roads and supply chain routes are still blocked. Aaron Collins is looking at what it's going to take to restore them.
On this stretch of road, the story of BC's latest natural disaster took a deadly turn. A mudslide driven by floodwaters carried vehicles away here. This woman was there.
It was the scariest thing I've ever seen. Like, I had no idea, so I just turned around and I'm just watching the whole side of the mountain come down and taking out these cars, and this everything just being swept away, and just complete panic.
Search and rescue teams combed the area for survivors. Officials say at least one person has died.
I would first like to extend my condolences to the family of the person who lost their life on Highway 99.
The rain that caused that tragedy has mostly stopped falling in BC's interior, but the damage is done.
The water line was right there.
Many homes here in the town of Princeton were underwater.
My people and my animals are safe, so that's all that really matters, but I'm just devastated.
As that water recedes, the cleanup has already begun.
I'm just glad it's over. Like, the cleanup you can handle, you know what's ahead of you. But when the actual flood is happening, you know, you just have no idea where you're going to be.
Up the road in Merritt, people are still trying to get out. One family rescued by helicopter today. Floodwaters took out the city's wastewater facilities. Officials say that without drinking water, people won't be able to come home for the foreseeable future.
People are not allowed to enter. It is simply not safe for anyone to be here who doesn't absolutely have to be.
All of this not far from Lytton, BC, where a heat dome fueled wildfires that wiped most of the town off the map this summer. Now, nearby land has been washed away by an atmospheric river.
Well, there's no doubt about it. BC's lower mainland has an extensive floodplain. The rains and the rising waters of the past week have us remembering the last huge flood in the region. It was back in 1948. A third of the Fraser Valley was completely flooded by murky brown water, and 16,000 people were told to evacuate. Here's the story from our CBC archives.
The Fraser has hurtled out of the mountain passes and overflowed its banks to cover thousands of acres of rich land in one of the most beautiful valleys in the world with the muddy waters of disaster. A new and terrible kind of desert suddenly appears, a desert of water. Only the trees and the tops of barns and houses still hold their heads above the flood. From the Black Wednesday that the Agassiz dikes broke, the tragic story moved with breathtaking speed toward its terrible climax. Community after community wavered and fell before the onslaught of the river. Every 24 hours brought fresh reports of disaster. Crops disappeared under the muddy waters. Valuable equipment and homes built by years of effort were swallowed up in the ever-widening Fraser. The last week of May 1948 will be remembered by the people of the Fraser Valley as a week of brutal tragedy. For miles, there were no longer the neat fields and fences, the pleasant farms and pastures and country roads, but only a waste of dirty water dotted with the rooftops of barns and houses. Whole communities were isolated and others engulfed by water. And all the time, the Fraser moved on relentlessly, rising each day as the melting snows poured their enormous weight into its headwaters. By now, the flood was recognized as a major disaster and began its long sojourn on the front pages of the newspapers. And by now, too, the full facilities of the Canadian Red Cross had swung into the battle. With the willing assistance of transportation companies and private individuals, the mass evacuations of flooded areas began. In some cases, evacuation by normal means was impossible, and the Army Duck went back on active service, this time on a mission of mercy. One of the farmers' greatest worries was for the safety of their livestock. Valuable sheep, in many cases, had to be taken to safe ground in rowboats. Each sheep had to be carried to shore, where they waited trussed up and panting in animal terror. Cows are one of the most important assets in the Fraser Valley. Many of them, marooned on high ground, were badly in need of milking. Every truck that could be pressed into service was utilized in an effort to rescue these animals. On Friday, May the 28th, the provincial government authorized the use of troops to aid in evacuation. Sailors became familiar and welcome sights to valley residents cut off by the floodwaters. Many communities found their streets turned into rivers and their houses into islands. Gone were the gardens hidden behind picket fences. Now, only the picket fences peered mournfully over the scene of desolation.
When we bring you stories here at CBC Vancouver, we have award-winning photographers out capturing the images that say so much. Still images add context and bring a lot more to the understanding of an event or an issue. Here are some of the latest from what was happening this past week. And that's all for Our Vancouver for this week. I hope you'll join me weekday afternoons on CBC Radio 1 for On the Coast. Stay safe and goodbye for now.